Welcome, Ashley. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to talk about Read This for Inspiration, or today we'll have talk about this for inspiration, I guess.
Yeah. It's so weird. I haven't seen very many people like holding the book. So you were just popping it in a frame was like, oh my goodness, there it is.
It's so beautiful. And I know this
you.
is a podcast and also on YouTube, but for the people listening, I am a sucker, as you can see from my bookshelves behind me, of all the different rainbow colors. So it says Read This for Inspiration in all different colors on the spine with yellow in the back, and all the illustrations are just so happy and awesome. So in addition to the actual content of the book, the container of it is so happy and something that we all really could use right now. So bravo on that.
Sorry guys, if you hear background noise, I'm outside and there's an airport near me. So that's what you're hearing.
You know what? There's always something. Usually it's sirens in my background, but trade-offs. So Ashley, tell me about your journey from BuzzFeed to publication, how this book came to be and how you kind of exploded onto the scene yourself.
Yes. My background is BuzzFeed. I worked there for 5.5 years before BuzzFeed was really what it was. I was a video producer making all types of different content. Now I'm a TV writer, and then have now written this nonfiction book that in some ways is a culmination of most of my life experiences. Like, I went to college to study international studies. I love languages. At one point, I lived in South Korea as an English teacher and thought I was going to be a diplomat. And so this book is very much a dumping of my brain. I have ADHD, and it's a function of how my brain works that these are in short little chapters about lots and lots of different subjects. So it was actually really relieving for me to write the book and to see it, because even now to this day, I can open it and it still looks like the inside of my brain.
And I love how you set out like all these rules at the beginning. You were like, you can read it like this, or you can just open it anytime you want, or you can do it like that, and it doesn't matter. It was like the most forgiving entrance. It's like you're holding someone's hand and being like, let me teach you how to use this book and how it can be a little different.
And really the rule is just however you want to use the book, you can use it.
And let's go back to your ADHD, which you talked about, and you said in the book, I'm not good at resting. In fact, I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, emphasis on the hyperactivities. Stillness does not exist in my bones, literally. And because of this, I am also not very patient. And then you talk about how you rush through everything and all the rest.
Yes.
Tell me about when did you know you had ADHD, and how did that affect even like your education and growing up and things like that?
Most women don't get diagnosed with ADHD until they're older, and I was the same. I was in my late 20s, and when I found out and finally got the diagnosis, almost everything clicked backwards in my life, where I was like, oh my God. One of the things that made me realize that I had it is that constant interrupting is a sign of ADHD. And my whole life, I just thought I was like that my brain felt fast, and I was like, rude or something. And then I realized, oh, this is just one of the symptoms of ADHD. And when I went back and started, actually talking to my therapist and to a psychiatrist, I had almost all of the markers for both deficit and hyperactivity. But because of the way women are socialized, we often can socially get around what most little boys can't, which is just hyperactivity and an inability to concentrate in schoolwork. So, for me, ADHD, it was very much a cycle of like feeling relieved and then feeling upset and then feeling confused about what that meant and ashamed. And now I really feel like I've embraced what that does to my brain, and how, this book wouldn't exist if my brain didn't have ADHD, because ADHD has an ability to like grasp different concepts from all over the place and put them together in kind of a weird and interesting mashup. And I think that's what I tried to do with this book, is just let my brain be free and bring together concepts that might not normally make sense.
Well, it's so funny because I've talked to other like big deal editors of memoir or narrative fiction or whatever. And they're always saying things like, try to play with time, try to like bring in this and mix it up here, and don't make it like too straightforward, make it more interesting. And that's exactly what you're saying, is like how your brain is like de facto state of operation, right?
Yes, it's nonlinear and just
Yeah.
kind of hops around. That's so interesting that editors are like looking for that.
Yeah, because because the rest of us, even if you don't have ADHD, which I don't know, I feel like I, I I feel like I have situational ADHD. Like I am constantly interrupted, and so I can't actually like think in a normal way anymore. No, I know it's much more. I know a lot about it, and I don't actually have it, but I do
I
feel
do.
like sleep deprivation and
Mhm.
other things can really affect your ability to focus. Not in terms of a underlying condition, but a situational condition. But
Yes. I also think that, in some ways, the way that we use social media now has affected all of our attention spans, whether or not you have a diagnosis of ADHD. We all have so much less attention because of the way we're constantly consuming content in little bites.
Yes. And so I think has its translation into fiction where
Yeah.
it's, keep people on their toes. Don't just like sit and tell them a story and expect them to, and not all, maybe it was just a handful of, I don't want to totally say that now people are going to be like, wait, I have to like change my novel and mix it up a little bit. No. But just in some instances, it can help keep the pacing or whatever. But anyway, I'll just say you do that naturally. And I love how you interweave, as you said, like all your personal stories. Like tell me a little bit about your abuela and his love of books and your special relationship with him, and then how you ended up dedicating the book to him, and
Yeah.
his great saying that you put. And I love how you of course I'm not going to find it at the right time, but what's this one at? There's always more to learn. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yep.
you have it here, which I'm showing on YouTube, but nobody can see.
Yeah.
And I won't even try to, massacre the Spanish. But anyway, tell me more about him.
Yeah. So the book is dedicated to my abuelo, and he is the entire reason that I love books. He he died in 2019, but he was like known as kind of a walking encyclopedia. Anything that he read, and he read in all sorts of languages. He read in French, he read in English, he read in Spanish. Anything that he read was like committed to memory, even all the way up until he died when he was 89. And he always used to write me letters in Spanish, and I would write back to him. And the entry that you're talking about is from a letter that he wrote to me. At the end of it, it's nunca crees saberlo todo, siempre necesitamos aprender más. Never think that you know everything. There's always more to learn. And I really think that that's how he lived his life, always in the pursuit of knowledge, in the pursuit of new facts. He in fact very much enjoyed discovering new things that would change his perspective. And I always very much appreciated that about him. And I think my sense of curiosity and appreciation specifically for words, you'll notice that a lot of the book has to do with etymology and the origin of language and what words really mean. I think that came solely from my grandfather, because he was so precise with all of the words that he chose. And he often corrected my Spanish and often made sure that I was using the correct words, the correct interpretations. I would go over to his house in order to learn Spanish, and he would pull out old letters that my dad had written him, and we would correct my dad's letters in Spanish, which was very fun. And we would correct my dad's letter in Spanish with Spanish English dictionary next to us, to be learning and always learning. And so I wanted to dedicate the book to him because it's very much an expression of love, of learning, and of always being curious and always discovering new things, and not being precious about where you discover new things, because you can find things everywhere and you can find inspiration everywhere.
That is such a genius idea, by the way. I have this giant bag of camp letters from summer camp, which is stuffed underneath a bunch of clothes in the corner of my closet. And how great, as my kids get better at grammar and learning to spell, hopefully they'll get better, to take those letters out, even in English, and have them correct them. And then they can learn more about me, and we can have a bonding moment. That's brilliant.
That literally it was such a fun way for me to learn about my dad with my grandfather there and learn about their relationship, and then also learn Spanish. It was just so fun and so personal. And I'm sure your kids would love that, because I think anytime as children we get a glimpse into who our parents really are and who they are when they were our age, it's mind blowing and it humanizes them.
Totally. And the people even who wrote me letters, because I
Mm-hmm.
saved a lot of those. Now with the emails, I'm always like, oh, I'm sure I'll be able to find this later. I'm just going to stuff it in this little folder on the side here. I'm never going to see that email again. But my
No,
old
and
letters I know where they
yes.
are.
And, you know, I think a lot of writers are very attached to words, obviously, but the only thing that I will ever keep, and I always think, like, if there was a fire, what would I grab? I keep everything anyone has ever written to me. Like, if I was at a bar with a friend and we wrote something on a coaster, I have that coaster. I have Post-its that my roommate used to write me in college. I have, like, anything that has words on it. And when my grandfather died, or right before he died, he showed me in his office there's like this, his whole desk was filled with every single letter anyone has ever written him. And the ones marked from his family were marked tesoros, which means treasures.
Aww.
And I was like, oh, that is at the end, like, all we have are these, like, treasures from each other and what we said to each other and how we made each other feel.
It's so true. And I'll tell you, the first thing that I always do, because I've lost a lot of people, as I know so many people have, whenever, I mean, I don't do this consciously, but I have found that one of the first things I do is like an inventory of
Yes.
what letters, where is their handwriting, what can I hold in my hand, what pictures do I have, what videos do I have, and I kind of like assemble it all together. And those become talismans. Like the note from my friend in college that I still have, like the birthday card from my grandmother, all of it. It ends up having so much more importance. So I don't know.
I've, like, memorized every voicemail my grandpa ever sent me. And it's so funny because voicemails are always so casual, and it just feels like, how did I not know this was so important? You know? And now my mailbox is always full because I refuse to delete any voicemails from anyone.
The only voicemail I refuse to delete is from Andre Agassi, who was like the second guest on this podcast. And I just thought it was the coolest thing that he ever called me. So I keep like deleting all the, annoying school emails or my parents or whatever. But like Andre Agassi, all caps, is in my voicemail inbox. Anyway. So wait, tell me now about your TV writing and what you're doing aside from writing great inspirational books like this one.
Yeah, my TV writing, I work on a show called Good Trouble, which is on Freeform. It's a spinoff of a show called The Fosters. And it's been such a fun exercise. I started in digital writing and writing short form content for the internet, and then moved into TV writing, which is group writing, essentially. Like, a lot of people, I didn't know, even as a writer, that what really the function of a writer's room is. And it's just a bunch of writers sitting with each other, discussing their lives and stories and seeing how it translates to other characters. And so really all writing is the same, I think. It's like humans sharing stories with each other and then figuring out the best form for it to take. But ironically, like, being in a writer's room, you do very little solo writing. When you get an episode, you go off and write, or sometimes you'll write scenes for different episodes. But it was more of a function of just like being in community with each other.
I know. I feel like I usually preferred solo projects to group projects in school, and I'm always like, and yet I kept getting like thrown together, particularly in business school, because they were like, you have to learn how to work as a group. And then the more I talk to people who work on in writers' rooms, it's the same thing. And I'm like, well, I guess I should have not. I have that opportunity. But a girlfriend of mine is going to be in a writer's room in January, and she's like, do you want to come in on our Zoom? And I was like, yes, I can't wait. I want to see what that's like.
It's definitely a very cool experience. And I think it's fun to be able to write in lots of different forms, because the book was very much written at exactly where I'm sitting every day at the same time. I would write during the dawn and during dusk. I found were the best parts for me. So like in the very early morning or at night, in the magic hour, essentially, of the day and the dawn. And the hardest part about writing this book was that I had to be inspired in order to write it. And so I was like constantly practicing how do I find inspiration and in what ways? And, part of it is like the discipline of looking for inspiration, but then oftentimes it would be at the times where I was completely exhausted, couldn't think of anything, and would go on a walk, that something would surprise me and give me a true burst of inspiration that was like unlike just pining and looking for it.
It's hard to say, like, okay, now I'm going to be inspired.
Yeah.
Although I guess now that we have your book, we now I have a time and a place that anytime I want, I can just go in. You know, another thing I noticed is how often you referenced Oprah. I feel like she must be some sort of cult
Yes.
hero of yours, because you talk about
Yes.
not only how she used to hand out free donuts on the street to get people into her
Mhm.
taping studio, but also how few iconic moments are relative to how much time the show took in general, right?
Yes.
How many hours. So tell me about you and Oprah.
Oh, me and Oprah. I wish that that was a real thing of like, here's my friendship with Oprah. But just like most of America, Oprah has just been like an icon in my house. And I think a purveyor of wisdom and somebody who has, I've looked to for perspective. Um, Me and my editor had a lot of back and forth about how much Oprah could be in the book.
Interesting.
And I won a lot of Oprah. I would say I was just flipping through the book the other day. I'm like, oh, the first couple of entries are very Oprah heavy, or people that Oprah has talked to and the wisdom that she learned there. But I think that, you know, I really respond to Oprah's like what I know for sure and little truths. She has a book called The Book of Happiness. I think Oprah is also someone who has been scouring the world in her lifetime for new perspectives and new learnings. And Oprah's person is Maya Angelou. Like, if you know anything about Oprah, all she ever talks about is Maya Angelou and what Maya Angelou taught her. For me, it's Oprah and Brene Brown are the two people that I constantly and incessantly talk about, who I feel like are women who have taught me a lot. But one of my favorite things that you're referencing is there's an entry about Oprah, how she had, I believe it's 4,561 or 4,651 episodes of the Oprah Winfrey Show. But
4,561.
561. I was trying to memorize it because this has actually come up a few times, but she had 4,561 episodes of the Oprah Winfrey Show, but maybe, I don't know, 10 of those episodes, but truly like 3 of those moments are iconic in American history and feel like part of our pop culture zeitgeist. And I think about the fact that, you know, she had a quote that said, do the work as an offering, and then whatever happens, happens. Because I think often as artists or creatives or people who are looking just for inspiration, we put a lot into whatever the next thing is and feel like it has to be perfect and it has to be the thing, where actually in actuality with life, like even what you're talking about with camp, think about how many hours you spent at camp, how many days, how many nights, and how many of those memories really stay exactly with you and how many of those are pertinent to you. And I think it kind of taught me that you can't hold everything so preciously, because you just do the work because you want to do it, because you love it, and you live your life because you have to live your life. And we're not really sure what's going to resonate. And it's not our job to figure that out. It's just our job to put out there what is important to us.
I love that. Well, that sounded like great advice. I always like to ask what advice you have for aspiring authors, and that is fabulous. Do you have anything else aside from basically keep putting things out there and letting the right people find it when they need it?
Yeah, you know, that pretty much sums up my advice, is that you don't need permission to be a writer. You don't need permission to be, and that the validation of, I think oftentimes for me, I was always looking for what is going to make me a real writer. What job am I going to get? Who's going to see it? Do I have to have a published book in order to feel real and authentic? And it's actually so much more about, I feel like a real writer when I'm writing stuff that I like, and no one could see it, you know, like it's like Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who's this amazing writer. She did Fleabag and Killing Eve. She's a television writer. She always says that like she writes for her one best friend. She just wants to make her one best friend laugh, and that's it. And she ended up making everybody laugh and is this incredible writer. But I think the pressure of thinking of an audience and people who are going to deem your work important can actually be the killer of creativity. And so it's like, just either write for your best friend or write for yourself, and take that pressure off. And then whatever happens, happens. If it goes out into the world and people like it, great. If it doesn't, I often think that the time of anonymity is the best time to be a writer, because you can fail in the dark by yourself with no one watching. So enjoy the time before the time where people are looking.
Love it. Failures in the dark.
Yes. The next book, I have
Unite.
to read this for inspiration.
Yeah.
Failures in the dark.
Read this for inspiration in your closet with the lights off. But
Yes.
well, Ashley, thank you. Thanks so much for coming on Moms No Time to Read Books. Thanks for this beautiful book, which just makes me smile whenever I see it, and which I'm gonna like leave out on my coffee table, even though it's tiny and adorable. Because it's
That's
really
exactly
happy.
what it's for.
Yeah,
That's
there
what
you
it's
go.
for. It's
Yeah.
for your coffee table. I made it specifically when I was designing it. I carry my books with me all around in backpacks and stuff. And it's like, I wanted it to be hard enough that it didn't get bent and that you could fit it into your purse, into your locker, or right next to you by your coffee table. So thank you so much for having me, Zibby. And it was great talking with you.
Great talking to you too.
Bye.
Right. Bye, Ashley.